All right, welcome to another episode of Catholic Mindset. Today we have Carmen Santamaría and Angelique Ruhi-López. They both wrote a book called The Infertility Companion for Catholics, right? Where it talks about spiritual and practical support for couples who are struggling with infertility. Before we talk about that, a little bit about you ladies. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well.
I'm doing good. Thank you.
How are you?
Doing good. Doing good. Enjoying your Saturday. Thank you for jumping on the show. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having us.
So let's define infertility. Let's jump right in. So that we say many people can have different meanings of what that could mean. So if we define it, we can start from there. So what is infertility?
Infertility can be defined as about a year of trying to conceive with no interventions, without the ability of having conceived. So it can run the gamut. Sorry, I don't, I don't like my answer. Hold on. Sorry.
Start again. So just
Yeah.
You want me to ask you the question again?
Yes, please.
Okay. So let's jump right in. Let's define infertility so everybody can have an idea of where we're starting with the concept.
Infertility can be defined as a year of trying to conceive without having a conception. So it could, especially obviously with no interventions involved.
Right. And
Okay.
it's about 1 in 6 couples in the United States experience infertility. And it could also be primary, which is like you're starting to try to have children for the first time, or it can be secondary, that you've perhaps had biological children and then you can't conceive anymore. So there's different ways, and the statistics show that it's about a third as far as whether it's, the woman, the man, or just something, both of them, or, something they can't really define why it's happening to the couple.
Okay. Okay. And then infertility, it can come from just the inability. So you said it, and then in 1 year, right?
Right.
And then, so that means that because a couple is trying and they don't conceive, like you said, so after a year, it is possible after they keep trying.
Right. That's when they're medically, diagnosed, let's say, as being infertile. For couples who practice natural family planning, it's actually 6 months, because those couples know a lot more about their fertility and are more attuned to, what's going on. So they actually, the definition is a little bit different for them.
So I guess percentage wise, or how many people can't because their body just cannot. It's not a matter of time or diet change or whatever, life change. Is there a number of people that just can't, like the?
I mean, I don't know the number for that. I mean, most people, right, once they're, let's say, diagnosed as being infertile, then, they pursue some sort of option, right? So whether it be some sort of medical intervention, or, I mean, yeah, it's
Testing,
just,
I guess.
testing, right? There's a lot of steps involved, but I mean, how many people are just,
Completely
infertile? I don't know them.
Yeah.
Okay. So after a year, then is when someone should seek help.
Right. Exactly. Right. They should go to, a medical professional and start to see, what's going on. Right. So infertility is really, it's a symptom. You have to see what's causing it if you can. I mean, sometimes you can't figure out why the medical professionals can't, but if you can, through testing, maybe there's a hormonal imbalance, or maybe there's something physical, like maybe the woman has endometriosis or something that can, with surgery, be corrected, and then maybe they can conceive. So there's things that you have to figure out, but you have to do that through testing and kind of seeing what the cause, what's going on.
Okay. So tell me about the book. Why the book? Why do I need a companionship book?
I think that when couples are facing infertility, it can be such a desperate, difficult time, because you feel called to be a parent, but it's not happening in the time frame that you wish. And so we've been there, each of us, at different points of our marriage with our husbands, and we we felt that loneliness of not knowing where to go, where to turn. And we found that the Catholic Church has such rich, beautiful teachings on the subject that can guide us at a time of desperation, at a time when we don't know where to look, where to do. There's all these different treatment options, and what do I choose? And the church, in a very beautiful way, says yes, and says yes to treatments that help to uphold the dignity of the spouses and of the child that they wish to conceive. And guides us in a loving way to healing, I think, spiritually and physically.
Okay.
Right. We saw the need for the book because when you're going through this journey, you're offered a lot of treatments and you don't know necessarily that the church has guidance and teachings on this. So actually, if we could just read, this is actually from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. So what they state, and it's just like the simple kind of rule. So any procedure which assists marital intercourse in reaching its procreative potential is moral. So that's licit. And procedures which add a third party into the act of conception or which substitute a laboratory procedure for intercourse are not acceptable, illicit. So, you know, all of this information wasn't, before we wrote the book, wasn't in like one place. So if you wanted to know what the church taught, you'd have to either read like, you know, something from the Vatican or, you know, kind of just inform yourself. So we really saw the need for putting something together that would help a couple that's struggling with this.
So what can we find in your book? How's your book structured?
Our book, so there's the teachings of the church, right? There's, and there's also spiritual stuff. There's even a book, like my husband wrote a chapter in the book. There's stuff for family and friends that can support. So it's both, why does the church teach what she does about the treatments? Then there's, what kind of treatments can we find licit, right, or good as Catholics? There's also a chapter on discerning, like what is God calling us? Like perhaps, some people are called to adoption. We have information on that. So I don't know if I missed anything.
No, I think that's, yeah, it's defining it initially and just trying to get people to understand what it is and why the church has the perspective that it does.
Okay. You guys mentioned treatments, right? So what are some treatments that are permitted and what that are not permitted? Let's start with the ones that are not permitted. What are some treatments that are not permitted? And then we go into why they're not permitted.
Sure. So we have in vitro fertilization, which is, I think, one of the primary ones, are the ones that people know the most about, and that's not permitted by the church. The reason why that's not permitted is because the sperm is taken from the man and the egg is taken from the woman, and they're united in a petri dish. So we have a third-party intervention there. And it's done in such a way that it's not upholding the dignity of each of them. And there's so many different moral ramifications for that, of, what happens to the embryos, how many are implanted, how they store them later. Like there's just a lot of ramifications there that the church is opposed to.
Yeah, if I may, because I didn't know this about in vitro, that pre-podcast, you were telling me that it's multiple eggs that are inseminated. Right. And then they choose which one is the best candidate. Right. And then they're implanted into the woman. And then those extra ones are frozen and they're kept there for X amount of time if the couple chooses to keep them frozen. It's kind of
right. They have to, there's a fee to keep them frozen. And then sometimes people don't want to keep paying fees. They feel like, oh, we already have the children that we want, if it was successful for them. And then they donate, that's quote unquote,
to science,
which means that they're killing them.
It'll be tested for sure.
Right. And then, similarly with choosing, right, that's an ethical dilemma. Like you're basically playing God, right? Because you say, okay, I want a boy, I want a girl, I want this characteristic or this other one. And it's, that idea of designer babies.
Yeah.
What else do we have in terms of options that people should not be taking?
Right. The artificial insemination, also similar to what Angelique shared about the IVF, except it doesn't involve taking out the eggs from the woman, but it also adds that third party, right? So going back to what I had stated earlier as like the rule from the USCCB, you're adding that third party who's going to take that sperm, which unfortunately many times is also obtained in, you know, an illicit manner, because many times it's obtained through masturbation, and then you're injecting that into the woman. So that's another common procedure that, you know, for Catholics is problematic.
Okay. And these, would you say they're the most commonly used,
Yeah.
or
I
this
would
is
say
it?
doctors might say, oh, hormone treatment, which is accepted, you know, hormone
Hormone
treatment.
Right.
But if they're not achieving within X amount of time, then they'll say, okay, in vitro, we'll send you to a reproductive endocrinologist. So the the gynecologist who's treating them will say, okay, this is beyond the scope of my expertise. You're going to another doctor, and what those doctors offer are in vitro or insemination.
Okay. So talking about the ones that are accepted, you're looking about hormone treatment, it's acceptable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and also, you know, surgeries to correct maybe something that, by, you know, endometriosis, like I said, it's sometimes, which is tissue that's growing outside of where it should, and maybe just removing that tissue, or maybe a blocked fallopian tube, for example. You can clear that out with a procedure, and then you can have, you know, they can conceive that way. So any sort of medical intervention that really just makes the woman or the man healthier is generally okay without those third parties. So either hormonal balance, you know, a needed surgery. It kind of, the difference also tends to be that the more, let's say, mainstream treatments are very cookie cutter. So, oh, you're infertile, you've tried for X amount of time, this isn't working. Okay, you're gonna go do artificial insemination or IVF. Versus the Catholic approach, which looks at the individual couple, right? And doctors are gonna test, okay, what's going on with this couple? What are the, you know, the hormones here? What's going on with the woman? What's going on with the man? And take a much more nuanced and individual approach.
And I
Yeah.
think sometimes that first line of defense also can be, if you don't practice natural family planning or know where you are in your cycle, sometimes it can even be as easy as you're timing it wrong, you know, because that's the beauty of those of us who practice NFP. It's that, you know, when in your cycle you're fertile and when you're infertile. And so that obviously maximizes the chances of conception when it is that you feel called to do so. And sometimes even just that first line of defense of having couples learn, okay, this is the time when, you know, you need to take your temperatures, or you need to look at your mucus signs, things to indicate when it is that you're fertile, can sometimes go a very long way to helping couples conceive.
You mentioned NFP. For those that don't know, NFP is natural family planning, right? And that is what you just described briefly. But for those that don't know, NFP is that it's where a woman and a man together, right? It's supposed to be a couple activity. They track the cycle of the woman to see when she's fertile, when she is not, and that helps plan whether it's the right time, or if you want to have a baby, or you want to wait a little bit. But it's a natural way to leverage the beautiful cycle of you know, the God-given cycle to the woman to be able to manage that.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I just learned that recently. That's why I just did a poor job explaining it.
No,
Not
you
at
did a
all,
great
not
job.
at all, no.
But okay, cool. Can we say that most infertility cases have some sort of solution? Some sort of solution?
I would say most.
I would say most.
Yeah.
Most? Okay. Okay. And leaning towards the right ones: hormonal treatment, surgery, looking at the couple, what's going on with the woman, what's going on with the man, because both, right? You guys said that it's almost equally shared, the infertility thing, because maybe I want to say that maybe culture or whatever, the sense is that it may be leaning towards the woman more as like they're the issue. But of course, you listen to what society says. You said it was a third.
Right.
So who is the third?
Well, no, the third would be either a combination of the two, or just that they don't, because sometimes they can't explain it. Like you'll do testing and everything comes out normal, and you might have a procedure and it still doesn't, you know, you can't conceive. So that's where we as Catholics know, okay, well, God's involved, right? So there's a certain element that we can't control, right? So society wants to control that, hence all these procedures, but we can't. So I was actually going to say, though, going back to what you were saying, asking about, are most, you know, cases basically, you know, can they find a solution? And the the percentage of couples who use, let's say, so there's this, the main Catholic alternative is called natural procreative technology, which most people just call NAPRO. And NAPRO has like a 60-70% success rate versus actually in vitro that has like a 30.
40. Yeah.
So
What?
Yeah. And they won't tell you that, right?
They
Of
won't
course
tell you
not.
The tune of
That's not how it works. That's that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think it's also more successful because, like I mentioned, it's like about the individual couple, right? So if you're finding out what's really wrong with them, then you can probably try to help them with that. And you can't always, right? But to a larger extent, you might be able to help them versus you're just bypassing what's really wrong and you're just trying to create the baby, and and you're really never getting to the what's really going on with the couple. And they also have a much greater likelihood of achieving like another pregnancy, right? So let's say it's like you're infertile, you're starting to try to have a family. With NAPRO, since they've actually tried to solve what's really going on, your ability to have another child is much higher than with in vitro, where you probably just have to go back, right, and do another cycle of.
Well, and then also the factor of that baby sadly might be miscarried, right? The one that's created with in vitro, because if you're not even looking at why the woman isn't able to carry a baby to term or isn't able to conceive, then if you're not looking at the reasons, there could be something biological that makes it so that, who knows, they may have conceived and then just not carried a baby to term. They're not looking at the underlying reasons. So here they are bypassing everything that God created and implanting the baby that sadly may or may not make it because they're not actually solving the underlying issues. So that leads to more heartbreak and more, on so many levels, right, for this couple that's already struggling.
Okay. Interesting. I'm still thinking about the 30% for in vitro compared to the, what is it called? NAPRO, we're calling it?
NAPRO.
Yeah.
NAPRO, which is 60 to 70%.
And they're not talking about that. Nobody.
No,
Right.
they're not talking about it. I mean, at the beginning, Carmen, I think you mentioned something about the primary or secondary,
right?
A little bit of what you were talking about now. Mm-hmm. Is it common? I have heard stories of people having difficulty getting their first kid when they get married, but then they get that first kid and then the other one's pop, 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 pop.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So can you tell me a little bit about primary and secondary a little more? Is it common? Is it okay? Is it, or
they're all okay, but I don't know that I have statistics necessarily on one versus the other. I mean, we've experienced both. Like she had primary and I had secondary. So, I mean, it really doesn't, you just never know. Right.
Right. Well, you don't.
Yeah.
But at least it's good to know what to do. Like there is solutions and support for families who are struggling to have babies, that the solution is not to run to these artificial options like insemination and or in vitro, and there are more natural, God-given ways to do this, right? That at the end have a much better outcome, like a lot of things.
Exactly. We have to listen to the wisdom of the church.
Yeah, right. So you guys mentioned the book talks about support. How can individuals like myself support friends or people who are struggling, right? That's the kind of support we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So what are we looking at supporting?
So I think that sometimes those of us, we all at this point in time know somebody who's going through or has gone through infertility. It's so prevalent at this point. The statistics tell us it's 1 in 6 couples in the United States. But sometimes there's this tendency either to avoid it. Oh, it's the elephant in the room, I don't want to talk about it with them. Or it's the other extreme of, oh, let me give you all the advice in the world. Oh, just do this and you'll get pregnant. And none of that is helpful to couples who are experiencing infertility.
Drink a tea.
Yes, absolutely. All the time.
My grandmother said, you take a shower with roses, all sorts of stuff. You'll see.
Yes, 100% to all of that. Unfortunately,
my grandmother has some crazy stories and how they claim to fix things. But yeah, communication is key, and support, being able to talk about it is so important.
Yeah.
Sorry,
and I think
go ahead.
No, it's giving people the space. Like, you also don't want to force anybody to talk about it if they're not comfortable talking about it. So just being there, say, hey, I'm praying for you. Is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything you want to talk about? Is there anything, can we go to mass together? Can we go to adoration? Let's go have coffee. Something to just be supportive for the couple while they're going through this. I think it goes a long way to know that they're not alone. And you can point them to resources, and that's helpful too. But at the same time, you need to kind of respect people's space and people's journey through this, and give them the opportunity to talk if they wish.
Right, but there are online resources. There's also at some parishes, like our parish has a ministry for infertile couples, so it just kind of depends on, what's out there, but giving them those good Catholic sound,
Yes.
morally acceptable options, that's really the best, the best support, because I think we have to remember that we are consumers of, our medical, practices or whatever. When we go to the doctor, it can be intimidating if you're, neither of us are in the medical field, and so they tell you something and you just believe whatever they tell you, right? So if you're really in the throes of infertility, you kind of just don't know, and they're like telling you, oh, you should do this.
Or in vitro is your only option.
Right. So you need somebody who can really point you into like, okay, no, you have other options. There are other things you can do, and that you need that other voice out there to help you.
Yeah, and there's online retreats now, there's online support groups, there's a lot of options out there now, which is, praise God, we need to be able to serve people who are experiencing this.
Can you give some samples of some names of like online resources? I mean, you don't have to be like www at, but I can share some of this stuff in show notes.
In the show notes. Yeah, I can't.
Called Streams in the Desert, that one that
the OSB.
Well, can we get back to you on that? Like,
yeah.
What happened is that we have resources in the book, but that was 10 years ago, and so now there's all these other things. I know Redbird Ministries is one that deals with miscarriage and infant loss. So we can send that to you.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll once the show is out, guys and ladies, you guys can check the show notes for any resources in relations to this conversation.
Sounds good.
Cool. So can you give me more of a little bit of example of how to support someone who's struggling with infertility?
I think just being there and listening, and saying, I'm here for you, that, I'm here to listen to you if you want to talk. And they may want to, and they may not want to, you can take them out for coffee or ice cream or anything like that. Maybe even a little note. There's, St. Gerard Magella, St. Anne, there's different patron saints that could be, interceding for them. And you can say, hey, I'm asking for the intercession of, this patron saint, and, a little prayer card, something like that. I think just so that they know that you're there and that you acknowledge and that you understand that this is a loss, that there's a grief process involved in, okay, we felt God calling us to have a baby, but it's not happening right now. Offer to go to mass with them, go to the Blessed Sacrament. I think there's many ways to be able to support them and be there for them, and allow them the space to be able to talk if they so wish. I think it's hard also because at a time, all their friends are having babies, all your friends are having babies, and you're the only one who feels like you don't. And so then there's the baptisms and there's the baby showers, and that's hard. And I think that we also have to give grace and understand that there might be a day where a person just really feels like they can't make it to X baby shower. And that's hard, but also the flip side of that, right, is for those of us who are experiencing that, to challenge ourselves to be there and celebrate life, right? Because if we really, really want, this is a life that we desire, to be there, to be able to celebrate life is a way to also challenge ourselves to kind of step outside of ourselves and be able to be there for someone else. So I think that it is definitely a process. It's definitely a grieving, and being there to support somebody just by allowing them the space to talk goes a very long way.
That's so important. People just keep things to themselves sometimes, and without communicating, then you don't know. You can't, if you don't communicate your struggles, then you can't find companionship in it. Like, you know what, Carmen, I also struggle with this, but I did this and this, and this is how I leaned on my faith, to support me. And then I found other solutions, and having resources. If you keep it to yourself, it's no good.
Yep.
Right. But I think we just really have to be respectful of everybody, and that it's different. Like Angelique said, it's a process, it's a grieving process. And you know, for many couples, because of the cyclical nature of this, right? Because it revolves around like the woman's cycle. I mean, it's like every month you're kind of just in this grieving process, right? And you're going through it, and the hope, and like, so it's hard, but just knowing and also just respecting that friend that you have, you know, you can say, okay, I'm here for you, and, you know, I'll listen, but sometimes people don't want to talk, you know, so you really just have to make yourself available, but also be very, you know, extending grace, like she said, if somebody doesn't want to do something at a certain point, understanding that.
Yeah. So in our pre-podcast conversation, both of you ladies mentioned that you guys had struggled at some point in different aspects of infertility. Do you guys want to tell us a little bit of your story? And I understand it led to adoption as well. So I think that that's awesome at the same time, being able to provide a family for a child in need. But tell us a little about your stories.
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
So I'll go first. So yes, when my husband and I
Angelique,
were
yeah.
first trying to conceive, we were, you know, it wasn't happening in the
Yeah.
timing that we were expecting. And because we did natural family planning, we saw that, you know, that my charts were okay, and we were puzzled by it. So we did testing, and, you know, it came back as unexplained infertility. So we really felt very strongly that God was using that as an opportunity for us to adopt. We were feeling called to adoption. And so we had the blessing of being able to adopt our oldest son from Vietnam. And he's 15 now. So it's been quite a blessing. And he came home to us at 8 months old. So we definitely are, you know, proponents for adoption. You know, we talked about all the medical interventions of infertility, and we're blessed as Catholics to have all these options. But we also want to encourage people to take a look at the option of adoption, that perhaps God is calling couples to adopt because of this experience.
And how many kids do you have now?
We have 6 children.
6 of your own.
All of us, all of them are our own, biological and adopted.
Biological in total, like that's 6, which is great. So your struggle was mainly at the beginning, and then you adopted, and then you were able to have your own kids. That's awesome. That's awesome. Carmen?
So mine's a little bit different. So we also used NFP in our marriage. And when we were ready to, I had gone back to graduate school, and when we were ready to have a child, we got pregnant right away. We have our daughter who's also 15, almost 16. And then we're able to get pregnant with our son after her. So, you know, we didn't think there was anything wrong. But my husband and I had, from the onset, from before we got married, talked about adoption being part of our family. And we had just thought we would do it a little bit later. But after we weren't able to have any more biological children, even after we had those 2, you know, we had testing, we decided, okay, well, maybe God is calling us to adopt sooner rather than later. And so we have twins that are adopted. So we have 4 children, 2 biological, 2 adopted.
And where did you adopt your kids, if I may ask? Since we know
our children are domestic adoption. So they
domestic, like
so we
South Florida.
Florida, not South Florida, middle
domestic.
but domestic. Yeah. So we adopted them as babies. Like Victoria came home when she was 3-4 days old, and then Danny had to stay in the NICU for a little bit because they're twins. So they were born a little bit early, and so he had to stay for a little bit. But they are super healthy and, you know, awesome, and yeah. So. Yeah. And our daughter had prayed for twins, so that was also our oldest, right? So she had wanted boy-girl twins, and that's what God provided. So there you go.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience of adopting? I know it's not for everyone, but if you're called for, what is that outcome?
I mean, I think, well, we know both of our families, you know, our children are all the same. Like, we don't treat our children any differently just because maybe they look a little differently than us. You know, these are all my children, and that's that, you know, and I think it's a different way of growing your family. And I guess it has its challenges, but I mean,
like anything,
right?
Anything
I mean,
challenges.
people also say the process is super difficult. For us, it wasn't that difficult. I mean, yes, you do have to do certain things, paperwork, and you do certain classes maybe, but things that you understand from a point of view of somebody's going to give you a child, right? So
Yeah.
they want to make sure that your home is safe. They want to make sure that you are
That
you're sane and you're, you know, like
Right.
normal things that you can understand, and you kind of just the same way you would apply for a job and go through, you know, certain things, you have to do that. And you have to be comfortable with people, social workers asking you questions and coming to your home. But that's also, you know, it's a small little inconvenience if
compared
at all.
to the blessing
Of course, to having
the child.
these children, right, that are a huge blessing. And I think in a society where how many children are not, you know, aborted, you're also being a witness to life, right? Like this is our family, you know, when we go to church, everybody sees our family, and it's very obvious. My children look very different from my husband and I, my adopted children. So it's very clear that they are adopted. So I think that's a witness to other people, you know?
Yeah. And I think also the blessing for our families and for our children is that we have many friends who have adopted children. So our children are seeing that this is a normal part of raising, of building a family, I should say. You know, it's just as normal as biological children. And I mean, we can't count, I think, how many people we know who have adopted children, and it's a blessing because they see that, you know, they see that in the kids they hang out with.
And I think people also say, oh, the children will have some stigma. Like I remember recently this summer, I was at a pool, we were on vacation, and I was not in the pool. I was like watching my daughter, who's the adopted daughter, in the pool, and she had made a friend, and she was talking to the friend. And she's like, oh no, that's my mom. And the girl couldn't understand that I was her mother, right? Because I don't look like my daughter. And my daughter just very matter of fact responds, oh yeah, I'm adopted. Like it just keeps swimming. Like it's just as if it was like she was telling her the sky was blue. Like it didn't matter to her. And the girl was like, oh, okay, like, you know, it's totally fine. You know, like people think that there's a lot more stigma, I think, than there is in the reality. You know, like my children are not different. I have 4 children. That's it.
Yeah. I like that because you're right. The stigma is like, oh my God, you're adopted, but it should be considered something beautiful, something positive. It's like, yeah, I mean, I have a family who their love goes beyond to the point that they absorbed or they adopted someone and gave them that love and that home. I think that's great. I think that removing that stigma is great because it shouldn't be like that. You know, adoption is a normal part, and it's a beautiful thing, giving another child a home. All right.
Definitely. It's been a blessing.
All right. This has been great. I know that we're running out of time. And I just want to say that thank you so much, ladies, for jumping on board and telling us about your book called The Infertility Companion for Catholics, Spiritual and Practical Support for Couples. So any final thoughts?
Well, we want to just remind people that there's hope, and the Catholic Church, in her love for everyone, has wonderful options, and we just want people to be informed and know about that, and also just not feel alone. You know, it's a hard time when you're struggling with infertility, but there's a lot of hope and love out there.
Yeah, I think that exactly what Carmen just said. I think to know that the church is supporting you, that Christ is with you, and to know that other Catholic couples may be suffering through the same thing, but can find hope in the teachings of the church.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Ladies, thank you so much for jumping on the show and telling us about your book and then this great mission you guys have been spreading the word about. I mean, I definitely learned a lot, and I will definitely share. I mean, that's the whole point of the podcast, to share. Ha!
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.